Hi everyone, my name is Tesher Cohen, and welcome to another episode of the All Things Interesting podcast, where it is my goal to share with you the unique stories of individuals across a wide range of backgrounds, to deconstruct the passion and meaning behind what they do, and to understand the traits that can be helpful to your life. On this episode, I bring on the co-founder of the San Francisco-based men's apparel company, Taylor Stitch. Over the course of the episode, we discuss the story behind the brand, navigating through the challenges of starting up a business, the case for manufacturing overseas, differentiating in a competitive environment, thoughts on the evolution of the retail industry, building capital outside of VC funding, and advice on pursuing your own company. With that out of the way, let's get right into it with my guest, Maher. So here I am with Maher, one of the co-founders of Taylor Stitch, a men's apparel brand based out of San Francisco, California. Glad to have you on the show. How are you, Michael?
Great, man. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. So, to kick things off with the show, can you talk a bit about how Taylor Stitch came to be?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my kind of background is grew up in Maine, went to school outside of Boston, and studied entrepreneurship. And one of my friends and I actually before we studied entrepreneurship, we thought we were going to be finance guys and go into investment banking. Fast forward to junior year, we went abroad to Australia. Spent a lot of time hanging out. And basically came back. We're like, what the hell are we thinking going into banking? We're at the school that focuses on entrepreneurship. There's so many amazing classes and professors, and we both want to do our own thing. And we're probably both going to be horrible employees. So let's go this direction. And we basically just dove in as deep as possible. Took every entrepreneurship class we could. Had run our kind of own businesses and things of that nature during summers, and knew that that's just kind of the best place for us is the kind of unknown, so to say. And we were never. It was always funny, like we had friends that went into banking and real estate and got corporate jobs and made a lot of money right out of school, and they all kind of looked at us and they were like, "What the hell is wrong with you guys?" And we were like, we're just going to do our thing. We're going to move to San Francisco and start a company. And this was actually our second idea. Our first idea was, based off when there's a van company called Wicked Campers in Australia and New Zealand, and we wanted to bring that back to America, because we had studied in Australia and then went to New Zealand after, and we were like, oh, this is really cool. At the time we got out of college, it was, the financial crisis of like 2007, 2008. Gas prices has gone through the roof. People were traveling less, and we didn't realize that the hashtag van life thing was going to like all of a sudden come together. And so we kind of we didn't do that opportunity. And the thing that we focused on was my co-founder Barrett's father brought back custom shirts from Hong Kong because he was in the toy industry, and Barrett would always steal them and bring them to college. And his dad got pissed because he actually had to wear these to work, and Barrett didn't need to wear custom dress shirts to class every day, but he finally just had they were pretty much the same size person. And so Barrett had his dad make him custom shirts. And I was kind of just enthralled. I was like, we called ourselves the perfect mediums. We're 5'9", 175 pounds, and we couldn't find a shirt that fit. These were the days of, the Brooks Brothers quote unquote slim fit was still an absolute parachute. And we were like, why is this reserved for the absolute like upper crust of humanity? For like bankers and lawyers and consultants were the only ones getting custom shirts, and and even the custom shirts that were being made were still not that nicely tailored. We went and we talked to a bunch of custom shirt makers, and their idea of slim was like +6 off the body measurement, which means if you have a 40-inch chest, the shirt they were making was 46 inches. we were like, this is crazy. This is still really big. And so we wanted to make a slimmer fit shirt. And, then we kind of moved out to California, and this was kind of the only hub of technology at that point. You started to see people dressing much more casually. And so we were like, well, why can't we make like a custom shirt that's less expensive or just more casual, and nicely made and all these things. And so we found the second oldest shirt maker in the country and partnered with them to make we went to like basically this like old stodgy man's trade show, and that all like the old men's clothing shops would go and buy clothes at. And we were just like talking to people, and like we found like one custom shirt maker that had one guy that was probably sub 40 working at it. And we're like, hey man, we want to make a custom shirt for like a younger generation that is, less billowy, more fitted, but still made to the same quality. And he like took a chance on us. We got up to the point where we were their second largest custom shirt making customer. And forged an amazing partnership and learned just a ton from them about how to make shirts, the balance of fit, and then just made a ton of shirts and learned a ton about like, the average size 40 chest has, X size waist and hips and arms and neck, and, kind of informed a lot of, our kind of proprietary fit that we do, which is, based on somebody's chest size versus small, medium, large, which doesn't mean a damn thing because it's such an arbitrary statement and it's really hard to understand. Or, we saw this permeation of tech, which means people were wearing less suits and ties. So, I look at myself today, like, my top two buttons are undone and my sleeves are rolled up. Like, how are you going to buy a 15.5 33? Because if you don't even know what your sleeve length is, right, or your neck size is. And I think like we've seen that continue to happen more and more. So we've tried to give people like a better idea of like the fit in the body is really what matters the most. And so that's kind of like how we bore this company. And from there it was just this like slow progression of how do we make the next piece? How do we start to make a ready to wear shirt? What does that mean? And what's the style that we do? And then what are we going to do different than other people? And then like same thing with like chinos, then with jeans, then with t-shirts, and kind of continuing to iterate into different products like that.
Now, I gotta ask, you mentioned that you and a couple of your friends actually attended a school for entrepreneurship back in the day. Mm-hmm. How much of an influence would you say that has had on your path versus taking a traditional route or non-traditional route of going directly into entrepreneurship? Because people typically say entrepreneurs are kind of that way from a young age. They typically start that lemonade stand, they do tennis lessons, or they sell candy from a young age. And entrepreneurship programs aren't typically the path people take to go into starting their own business. So it's kind of interesting to see that you took a somewhat semi-traditional path and was still able to navigate to starting your own business. So how much of an influence would you say did that have?
Yeah, I think it was an influence, but I was definitely on that path of starting my own business. I was 100, like both my parents, were entrepreneurial. My dad's been running his own engineering company since the day I was born. And it's always something that I've admired, and I've always kind of like wanted to do my own thing in some way, shape, or form. And it, we randomly, I grew up in a small town in Maine, and we randomly also had a business program there. Like something that by the time I graduated high school, we had taken strategy, micro, macro economics classes, marketing, entrepreneurship, multiple accounting classes. And so the school that we went to is called Babson, which you can only get a BS in business administration there. There's no liberal arts degrees or anything like that. You kind of have to know what you want. Mm-hmm. And look, I knew what I wanted to do at a very young age, and that was business. I had played with the idea of finance. I played with the idea of real estate. Both places that you can go be entrepreneurial in, and I think give you like a solid background of just like how to run a business with financial rigor. Mm-hmm. And that was a big piece of this. But yeah, like I absolutely like, my lemonade stand was also like my mom was a master gardener and a landscape architect in many ways. And I'd make her make bouquets for us that I then wanted to sell next to my lemonade stand, which, listen, it was great. You had like quite a 100% profit margin on something that your mom grew and then did all the free labor for you. It was a beautiful business. And, those were the things. And then that turned into, okay, we had, trucks because my dad had an engineering company and my mom was a landscape architect. And so I was like, okay, let's start a landscape business. And so we, me and my buddies in high school and college, we were driving around in dump trucks and, that again, like we weren't paying for the gas and we weren't paying for the, for like a lot of normal expenses. And then my mom was doing like free landscape architect. Like she would design gardens or rock walls and things of that nature, and we would go build them. And so people like, you'd have these people that were kind of amazed that we were doing like full service landscape design and build, like 16 to 20 years old. And, and we were able to do it at a fraction of the price because, it was kind of like a hobby for my mom at that point.
What would you say was the biggest lesson or influence your parents taught you that developed your entrepreneurial mindset and your acumen for business itself?
I think it was a lot of just, my dad has this very, kind of just doesn't give a shit what anybody thinks of him attitude. And it's just like, and I think that's such a necessity in the world of entrepreneurship because there's so many like trying very hard times. And, if you don't have the ability to kind of continue to push through and care, like, if you see your, like, listen, I had a lot of friends that like went and were making like 150, 200 grand at like, 2 years out of school banking. And my buddy and I were making absolutely nothing. We couldn't afford to, go out to dinner. And so our friends would like fly in from New York and Mexico City and, take us out to dinner. Or like one time our buddy from Mexico City flew us down to visit him because we were like, yo, man, we just can't come see you. Like we're doing this business thing and like, we don't have the money. And, he's like an incredibly generous, like awesome human, to do that. Like, you don't think of like a lot of 24-year-old boys as, that having that wherewithal to like be nice to their friends in that capacity. Because Maury's just like, yo, I want to hang out with you guys. Like, if you're not going to come because you can't afford it, I'll just buy you a plane ticket. So,
right.
But I think it's that ability to just kind of say, fuck it, I got this. We'll figure it out. We can live off, Trader Joe's pizzas and, living in a small apartment with, 5 guys in a 3-bedroom apartment. And, this is fun. And I think it's also, listen, we were at a time and place in our lives where we had that ability. And I think like that's also like a special thing. Like you don't know any better. You don't care.
Right.
There's a beautiful naivety to it of starting a business at that time in your life.
Is there a fear of pursuing a business like that, especially when you're strapped for cash, you're living in an environment such as San Francisco? I believe it was San Francisco. That is typically extremely expensive to live in. I mean, housing there is astronomical, and you're kind of navigating through a very dense environment where everybody's pursuing their own business. Everybody has their own startup. Did you find that to be somewhat challenging or demotivating when you see all these other people doing the same exact thing?
No, I think like there's, I actually find it to be motivating when like everybody's trying to do something and figure something out. So we had a really interesting living situation. The first year we moved out to San Francisco, we had 5 guys living in a 3-bedroom apartment. We had what we called room roommates, where, me and Barrett, who I started the company with originally, had, we shared a room. And then in the room next to us, there was, our friend who was a first-year assistant account manager at Goodby Silverstein and Partners out here. And he was like just trying to like get his foot in the door in the ad world. And then our other friend was starting a company, at the time was called Idea Paint. He then has gone on to start like a very successful tampon company called Cora. But it was just like, it was such an entrepreneurial environment. And then we had like the one guy who was a banker who could like actually afford his own bedroom. But it was like, we actually thrived on it because it was fun. You're like figuring, it was an entrepreneurial problem to solve. It's like, okay, we're in this really expensive city, but we absolutely love it here. We love our friends. What are we going to do? It's like, okay, we're going to get a apartment that, we need to share, everything. And I mean, it was just like, it was a total gong show, and nobody cared. And like, there was such beauty to that. And it was like so pure, where you're just like, fuck it, we'll figure it out. We're smart enough, like whatever. And if we don't, who cares? We'll just go get a job, and like, we can always start again. Like somebody's going to hire us just because we were, silly enough to go do all this stuff and solve a lot of these problems. And, we know we have marketable skills. So it wasn't demotivating as much as it was motivating.
So there's this phrase that you are the 5 people you typically surround yourself with. And this is spot on in terms of that. You kind of put yourself in a situation where you're living with roommates who are all striving to achieve the same goal. You're all leveraging each other and leaning on each other, not only for motivation, but for guidance and for skills. And it kind of lifts everybody up, so to speak, when you're all trying to achieve that same end goal. So I find that really cool to see that you're able to all navigate through a situation like that.
Yeah, 100%. I think the people that are just as crazy as you are, that's who you want to surround yourself with, because they're not going to tell you it's a bad idea. They're going to egg you on. I always want to be egged on, and I always want to egg people on.
So I want to start going down the path of the brand itself. And the apparel industry is very saturated. I would say more so saturated from the women's end than it is from the men's end. But I got to ask, how would you describe Taylor Stitch in terms of its style, and how did you kind of carve out a niche in terms of that?
Yeah, so like, listen, I 100% agree. Apparel's, probably behind restaurants. Apparel's, one of the, dumbest businesses you can start from a like, guarantee of success ratio. It's the highly likely to fail. For us, it was more, we were students of brand. I grew up close to LL Bean, and there was always something, that I loved about their service model. And, the thing that we did was we made a great product and we provided great service. And I think that when you do that those are the 2 main core competencies that any business can have. And if you do that, even if it starts slowly, it snowballs. And by being able to provide that amazing service, people will come back. And that, like, getting people to come back is like where you start to, really turn into a bigger business. And I think that was the thing that we did to carve out our own niche, was just put like, an undying focus on customer service and experience. And, and also humanity. If we screwed up, we found that the best way to diffuse us screwing up was just to own it and apologize. A lot, like, so many brands and businesses try and cover up their mistakes. And we've always taken the path of like, yeah, guys, there's humans on the other end of this. We screwed it up. We're super sorry. Like, we're going to make it right, because like you as a customer are really the only thing that matters, outside of like making great product. So we could build the best product in the world, but if nobody's there to buy it, then we don't have a business, and this doesn't work.
It's great that you pointed that out. I remember being back in college. I was in the retail and consumer science program at the University of Arizona. And one of the things we covered was a case study on Zappos. Zappos is a shoe brand. I believe it's based out of Las Vegas. I could be mistaken on that. Yeah, nope, it is.
Las Vegas.
But their focus for their brand was customer service above all. Specific to that, their customer service representatives would go out of their way to help customers find a pair of shoes, even if it wasn't something that they offered. They would direct them towards other companies to purchase the shoe. And that's something that's not typically traditionally seen in the retail landscape. Companies typically want customers to buy from their own company. They don't direct them towards other businesses. So from that, you could see a huge sense of customer service and kind of admonishing, wanting to provide them the best experience possible, even if it isn't from your company. So in many ways, it's interesting to see that your company is also doing the same thing by purposefully pushing customer service as one of the main tenets or elements of your company's focus or goal.
Yeah, I mean, listen, what Tony did at Zappos is like, I believe one of the most amazing, examples of customer experience. Two other ones that I really lean into is, I mean, LL Bean to me was the original. Like they had a 24/7, 365, never closed policy.
Uh-huh.
And, for like the shining moment for me was I walked into the LL Bean store. We were leaving to go on a fly fishing trip in Canada, like very remote Canada, at 6 a.m. on Saturday morning. And we walked in, I mean, I guess it was Saturday at 1 a.m. We were leaving 5 hours from now. My buddy was coming with us and he needed to get like a new fly fishing setup because he waited till the last minute. And so like, we were like 16 years old. We like hopped in the car, drove up 15 minutes away, and we walked in and we spoke to, somebody that actually knew what they were talking about on Friday night at 1 a.m. about like buying, like, what we needed to go to this like remote area of Canada to fish. And the guy like got him all set up, and I was just like awestruck that, I mean, that's not like, hey, you should buy this shirt because it fits. It's like, hey, here's this like very esoteric information you need to know about a sport. You're like, it was crazy. And so there's that, and the other one is backcountry. I think what Jonathan and Chris is the one that runs the Gearheads are doing at backcountry is incredible. They're they seem to know you in a way, and they've done an amazing job building that out. Like, listen, especially when you're a retailer like Zappos or backcountry, like that's a huge differentiator, is understanding consumers and what they need, because that's a huge selling point, because you might not be selling 100, you're selling a lot of gear that other people sell too, but that's your differentiator.
Yeah, I think people or companies these days should put a greater emphasis on customer experience and customer service, because at the end of the day, you can sell product all you want, but to sustain that growth and to sustain conversions with customers, it's important to show that you actually care, to show that you're willing to go that extra mile for them. And one of the things that Taylor Stitch is doing is a focus on sustainability. Can you talk a bit how Taylor Stitch is tackling this?
Yeah, so we hate the word sustainability because we think it's a thinly veiled marketing term. We look at something much more holistically. And we talk about responsibility. Like, we want to build a responsible company. And, there's a lot of brands out there that say like, hey, we're sustainable. And it's like, okay, you made one shirt with 5% recycled polyester and you call this like your sustainability. Like, so we kind of like, we say sustainability is bullshit, and we think that like you need to build a responsible company, and that's, really looking at your business holistically. And so for us, we've developed 5 pillars. So the first one, and like, listen, this has taken us a long time to get there. And we've never, like, I will also be the first to admit that we are far from perfect. But we're on a path that I think is, we're small but mighty. The first thing is build product to last. So the best thing that we can do as a business, or anybody can do as a business, is build something that's not going to break down. So like, don't be a part of fast fashion, build something that, you as a customer can own for the next 3 decades, and it's just going to get better. Like, we talk about wearing in, not out. And, because the biggest problem is that 85% of apparel every year ends up in the waste stream, ends up in a landfill. That's also inclusive of stuff that you donate to places like Goodwill and Salvation Army. So every time that we feel like, hey, it's like feeling good about dragging a few bags of clothing down to the Salvation Army, on Saturday morning, it's like actually not. So that's the first thing. The second pillar is use responsible materials. So, we're at a point where 95% of our cotton is organic this year. We also do a lot of, recycled materials from recycled poly, upcycled cotton, recycled nylon, wherever we can. And then the third is care about the people making them. So we're working on building development funds. So we actually built our manufacturing partner in China actually built our own tailor stitch factory for us. They run it. We don't actually have ownership in it, but it only makes tailor stitch goods. So it allows us a closer relationship to the people making our clothes, because we're not previously we're using, I don't know, 15 or 20 different contract manufacturers all over, the world. And, we've gotten that down to like 3 or 4 at this point. And, I would say the preponderance of our product is made at this one factory. We're able to do fun things like, we know that we're paying them prevailing wages. We're building development funds, based on performance. So, they get more money than just the prevailing wage that we're paying them. The fourth thing we do is we just make sure we don't overproduce. So overproduction is the thing that leads to, high discounts or, as I'm sure a lot of people saw, Burberry got put on blast last year for burning $30 million worth of merchandise.
Wow.
Like that is not a good use of our world's finite resources, is making stuff and burning them. So we use things like we built our own crowdfunding, what we call the workshop is our own internal crowdfunding platform. And we actually gauge whether that product's going to sell or not before we manufacture it. And if it, does well, we'll make it. If it doesn't do that well, we'll make some of it, or not at all. But we don't want to make something that our customers don't want, because that's not good for the environment. And the last thing is, do everything you can to keep things out of landfills. So we partnered with Yurtle, which is, an awesome re-commerce platform here in California. And they power what's called our Restitch program, which is where we take in all of our defects or any, well-loved clothes that our customers have had for, many years, and or that they just don't think they're going to wear anymore. We'll fix those, clean them, and resell them. And so, kind of creates this level of circularity at our company level.
So those are incredibly interesting actions that your company's taking to focus on reusing and limiting the amount of resources your company is using. 2 of those that really do stand out, though, is the Restitch, because I don't think I've seen a single company out there that does the same type of material recycling. And then the second is the workshop, because there's 1 other or 2 other brands that I'm aware of that do that. One being Gustin, and the other being Jommers. And I think they've gained a lot of popularity by doing limited releases of their products based off demand. And I think it's very sustainable for the business, because it allows them the ability to manage their production of their products. So I think those are really interesting ways to focus on limiting uses of their products and raw materials.
100%. I couldn't agree with you more. We were amazed when we started to crowdfund all it. So we release a new product every single week into our crowdfunding platform and see if it does well. And this is a much easier a thing for us to manage than doing a massive 100-piece collection that we don't know if people are going to care about or not, at the beginning of every season. So we'd much rather bleed that out 1 piece at a time. It's also much easier for the consumer to understand. It's hey, do you like this piece or not? Instead of hey, do you like this sea of things? It's there's something special about every piece every week. And we take a great deal of care developing the fabrics and caring about the fit and fabrication as well.
One of the things you pointed out was that your products were made in China. Now, made in USA is a big selling point for many customers these days. And recently, your company transitioned to manufacturing its products from the US to China. I can't say this is for all of your products. I'm not fully aware. But can you talk a bit about this decision and how your company is basically looking at this from a quality perspective in relation to sourcing?
Yeah. So there's 3 things that I talk about when I talk about manufacturing. And they all kind of have their own like piece of the pie. And so there's quality and consistency. We moved all of our manufacturing for like our woven shirts and our lighter weight outerwear was the first two things. And at that point we had 5 different shirt manufacturers. And, when we were and we were taking care of all of our vendors, like so we'd order like fabric from one place, buttons from another, interfacing from another, thread from another, and we try and get it all to the manufacturer and then have it come out consistent. These could be at different manufacturing facilities. That like it just led to, it was a total cluster. Mm-hmm. And, the biggest thing that like we could do is like make an amazing product for our customer. We found that the US is not a manufacturing hub anymore. We are not the best sewers on many things. Like I think the US does denim and knit production well in many regards. And, it doesn't have a great woven shirt needle anymore. And so, we went to a place. Listen, China is far not the least expensive place to make anything anymore, but they have the best skilled labor that I have seen to sew out of anywhere we've ever visited. And like our goal is to make the best product. When we wanted to make things with organic cotton, we could never do that here in America. Like any of the fabric places we went to source from, they like laughed at us when we said we wanted to use organic cotton. And we were like, well, we're just trying to be a better company here. And like our Chinese partners were like, listen, we are not a big company. We are not big enough to probably be in China in many regards. But they were excited about the environmental and social care that we were giving to our product that we weren't getting in the US, Spain, or Portugal. They were not investing in their machinery or their workers the same way that, China was from a training perspective. From like any time that we're like, hey, we need a lock stitch button hole machine, our Chinese manufacturers like, oh, no problem. I mean, they went and built a factory for us. Nobody here was doing that. And like, I will be the first one to say that I was, waving the Made in the USA flag for a very long time. And, I can't remember who I think it was like a famous inventor said this, but like when the information changes, my opinion changes. And, I think that like we continue to learn more and more about this industry as we grew and as we talked to more people. And we just found better partners that were willing to make a better product and also care about the environment and the social responsibility side of it. And like the environment and social responsibility is the next thing after quality and consistency of product that we focused on. And, in a partner there, like, I don't care who you are, where you are, what you are. We only have one Earth. And if we don't take care of it as an entire community, like we have one community, and that's like the human race is the one, whether you live in, China, South America or the US, like we all have to take care of this one place we have. And they were caring about it way more than other people I had seen anywhere else in the world, as it relates to working with us. Mm-hmm. And, in those partners, we got really excited, and then the last piece of it was that we, like, at that point, we were not going to be able to sustain as a company, just so we weren't profitable. This is going to be the first year that we're kind of running at break even. And yeah, like, did we save a little money by moving to China? 100%. But like, we needed to save enough money to at least run at break even to, to have a business that's going to be around for the next 100 years, because that's what I care about. I'm not building this business to be a venture funded, quick flash in the pan, nobody cares about because we just sold it 5 years from now and then it becomes a discount brand. This brand is to be here for, a very, very long time. And whether that means that it's a $10 or $15 million brand or, $150, $200 million brand, the care that we're going to put into it is that the product is going to continue to stay top quality and we just need to at least break even so we can continue running. Because I don't want to be responsible for running a business that has to be supported by the capital markets.
Mm-hmm. You pointed out a lot of attributes that China focuses on, or that the manufacturing in China is capable of doing compared to what manufacturing in the US is capable of doing.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you think the perception that made in US was a huge selling point or a big emphasis for customers? And do you think that that's going to change in the near future as people begin to realize that manufacturing and sourcing from other countries such as China can be not only more sustainable, but more fruitful in terms of quality?
Yeah, I think it's easy to go back to what you know. Like for me, like I grew up in Maine and I watched, the shoe, and there's a huge shoe industry in Maine. So, you know, Bass, Deckers, Cole Haan, all these had manufacturers. And, I think the thing for me that was the reason that I thought that, made in the USA was the best thing was because, I saw these people, I knew some of these people. I watched towns get decimated when all of the jobs went overseas. That was not something that like happened at Taylor Stitch. We didn't, employ 10,000 people in a town and then all of a sudden take their jobs away from them. Like that is like 100% a sad thing. And I think like that's what a lot of people in America harken back to. And for us, jobs change. People also thought that when the sewing machine came to be as a technology, they didn't want it because they thought that it was going to take away their jobs. It's like people continue to find other jobs, like technology, makes jobs easier. Or hey, like there's also, maybe a future where, manual labor like sewing is not a thing, and like, everything's more democratized, and education's better for all, and everybody just refocuses onto something that's a different industry than sewing. So I kind of my general feeling is that yeah, we look at it one way, and like a lot of people, like the natural human condition is to be resistant to change. And as an entrepreneur, I think that like I am all for change in like any way, like whatever makes something better, like that change should happen, and like that should be more efficient. And like at the end of the day, it's going to eventually make things better for everybody. And so I think that's what a lot of people kind of hold on to with this made in the USA thing. And to kind of go on to your second question around, do I think that that is going to change? Like people's perception of these other countries is going to change. I think it's up to the consumer to form opinions based on education, and it's a tough thing to do if you're not in a particular industry. Like, are you going to do the research? And I think, well, yeah, there's certain people that are going to do that to care, but the reality is we're all busy humans, mm-hmm. And you need to, like, I find experts in anything, like, and I trust them. Like I have people that I look to who I think are, the foremost experts in like maybe food and wine and like restaurants and recipes and things like that. And like, I go to them to learn from them because that's where like I'm going to gain my own knowledge and help form my own opinions. And I think that like it's something that it's a little more difficult in the manufacturing industry because you're just not that close to it. And we try and decode it a little bit for as much as we can for people, but it's still a challenge. And also, like, I think that there's not as many people that care about it as, say, like an organic vegetable. Mm-hmm. whether we use organic cotton or you eat an organic tomato, like it's just a different feeling, I think, because although you put clothing on your body, you don't put it in your body. And so there's just it doesn't seem that, I mean, it's getting better, but it doesn't seem that there's quite that same care.
And I think people are typically creatures of habit. Like you said, they're so used to having what they currently have. And it's very hard to change that mindset, especially when people seem to be so busy with their lives. And I like the point you made about, although it's something we consume, it's not something that we put in our bodies. So there's kind of that discrepancy in how people perceive products and their quality, as well as them being organic and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
I think that companies should continue to pursue driving knowledge to the customer in that sense. I think that there's such an issue with how they perceive quality to be built just because it's made in the USA, as opposed to products being built in other countries. And let's be honest, the majority of our clothing is manufactured overseas, and it's no one typically complains about that unless it's a expensive piece of apparel. So how does Taylor Stitch justify the prices when consumers are already hearkened by the fact that it's not manufactured in the US?
100%. And the thing that we focus on is the money, like a lot of the money that we saved from like the actual manufacturing cost, we reinvest in our responsibility initiative. So organic fabrics, recycled fabrics, continuing to make things that are better, stronger, that are going to last longer. And so that's how we're justifying the price. Is we are making products with better fabrics than we ever have before. And those like inputs and raw materials are the things that cost more money. They're not cheaper, they're more expensive. And that to me justifies the price. Is something that's like, listen, you invest, I've always lived by it's a lot cheaper to buy nice things because you don't have to go buy them multiple times.
Right.
And that's how we stand by everything at Taylor Stitch. We'll also stand by it with a guarantee. Like, listen, if you bust something or wear it out, like, we're going to help you keep that out of the landfill and help you keep that in your rotation. Like, I mean, I have access to all of the clothes I could ever want. We make amazing stuff, and I own 3 pairs of jeans. And most of them are over 5 years old. And so like that's how I justify, the price point is like my cost per wear on my garments are so low, and they're amazing because they're an expression of my own personality and like the things that I've done, and there's stories to each one of them. And whether those are made by somebody in China, the US, Europe, Mexico, I don't care. Like I love all of those people, because they're awesome humans. Mm-hmm. And they do a hell of a job at what they do. And listen, you can get cheap stuff made anywhere. You can get a super cheap t-shirt made in Los Angeles, and the labor practices could be absolutely horrible. And there's, no maternity leave and no health care and like all of these kind of crazy things that kind of fly under the radar that you can do. But like, I'd rather be investing in the people like I really know and have great partners with in China. Like, it's awesome. Like our product team goes over every quarter, and we forged amazing relationships with them. And I think it's like, to me, it's a little sad that, we kind of just take what we know at face value, or what we think at face value, and don't do that exploration,
right,
into these cultures.
I want to change directions to the entrepreneurial side of things once more here. Starting a business, let alone an apparel business, can be a daunting challenge. For anyone that wants to start an apparel business, can you walk through the process of what it takes to get up and running?
Oh man, it obviously depends what you want to do and the product you want to make. I always start with the product. It's trying to figure out, asking the questions, whether you need to understand where to manufacture or who to get a pattern made from, or where to source fabrics. Those are kind of the first things, and then it's finding the consumer. there's obviously like the legal stuff where like, listen, you can go to LegalZoom and fire up an LLC or an INC, overnight. And, I recommend doing that than trying to, go pay, the highfalutin lawyers a ton of money right off the bat. Because I think that's just an unnecessary investment. Like, go test to see if people actually like your product, and find places where you think a consumer might be, whether that's a pop-up shop or a flea market or opening a website or, there's a million different ways you can do this. And listen, if you think you have like, once you've kind of tested, if you think you have a big idea, yeah, you can go raise some more money, but I think getting traction and testing is the first thing that anybody should do before committing, to what is, going to be at least 10 years of building a brand and a business, and also kind of just understanding what you want out of it too.
That's very sound advice on the process of starting a business. And Blake Mycoskie, the founder of Tom's Shoes, is a great example of what you outlined. I won't go into detail as Blake had a great conversation on the Tim Ferriss podcast about this, but there were a lot of parallels between what you described and how he built his company.
100%. Yeah, it's exactly what people need to be doing. And hopefully it becomes more and more of a table stakes for businesses to be giving back.
One thing I've noticed about Taylor Stitch is that you went towards a crowdfunding process as opposed to securing VC funding. Can you kind of walk through that decision and how it impacted starting up the business?
So, we were like, the business was originally that we were going to make these custom shirts, put them online, partner with tailors and dry cleaners and this kind of custom fit body scanner and raise a bunch of VC funding. And, we quickly realized that, like, with the financial crisis and, two 22-year-old boys who didn't know a damn thing about making clothes, or building e-commerce websites, nobody was going to give us money. So it was hard. I mean, we kind of went the opposite way, and, in many ways, I'm very glad we did, was we bootstrapped it. Barrett and I each threw $12,000 at this business. And, for the first, 2 or 3 years didn't raise any money. We did raise about a $500,000 convertible note from friends and family around 2011 when we had our first, 2014, when we'd had our first store open. We had a website, the website was growing, and we wanted to build something that was bigger and better. But it was, starting the business, yeah, there's challenging days. Like, you screw stuff up, we didn't have, we didn't have a background. So, like, the reason that we started the crowdfunding was because we didn't have an inventory planning background, and we kind of, it's like necessity is the mother of invention, and looked at it and we were kind of like, yeah, like, every time we make these shirts, they sell out, and like the business keeps growing, and that's good, but we're probably missing some customers here. And the buys, 50 shirts turned into 250 shirts, and buying 250 shirts is scary. So what if we just asked our customers what they wanted by having them pre-purchase them?
Right.
And so that's what we did. And then we were like, oh, this is way easier than trying to guess what our customers are going to want. And it also brings them to the front of the value chain versus like sitting at the back where everybody else puts them. Mm-hmm. So it's this like differential where, our customer is now way more engaged than most other customers in our brand, because they actually feel as though they have a voice in what we're doing.
And as a consumer myself, I find it to be a very good practice by companies, not only to maintain the production, but just to make it seem like there's more of a limited presence around that specific product. That said, what are some of the greatest challenges you faced while starting up Taylor Stitch, and how did you work through these?
Not having money is always a big challenge. So you weren't able to hire anybody, so you're doing everything yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I think building community without tons of marketing dollars is always a challenge. But I think what it does is it forces you to build something that's truly authentic, and it's going to last. I mean, I will tell you, in 2010, we rented a 4,500 square foot space in probably one of the worst blocks in the entire city. And we had like some people co-working out of the top. We were, we had a store per se. We were selling coffee in the morning, and we had this massive like art gallery event space that we had kind of built out, and we were throwing, I remember Halloween. It was like, wow, it was a very fitting time of year, 2010. We had thrown a party that went till about 4:30 in the morning with 6 bands, and from there had to wake up at 7 a.m. and start serving coffee to people because that's when we like had said it was going to open. And
Wow.
you at this point we are so tired. We are on the verge of quitting this whole business, and it was like we were shot.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of January 2011, we thought about like, okay, how do we focus this? So we kind of all went our separate ways for Christmas. Went back to the East Coast, visited our families, kind of came back, and Barrett, my one of my co-founders, had found a retail space that was 700 square feet in the Mission next to this awesome coffee shop who we were friends with. And he's like, what if we gave this another year? What if we could sign a year lease that's super cheap? Let's just focus on selling clothes. And we did. And like, that was kind of like this aha moment where it's like, yeah, focus, like do what you do best. And we opened and there was more foot traffic. We were able to build community way faster. And all of a sudden we had like a real business. And that was kind of like, it was that perseverance that we had to continue on that allowed us to, really get to where we were. But that's kind of like the big lesson learned, from the face of adversity.
Right. I think those 2 points you made are things that people often forget when starting a business. It's the struggle a company goes through when they're in the startup phase. There's a lot of sacrifice involved with getting your feet off the ground, especially like you said, when you're hosting bands at 4 in the morning and then quickly turning around to going back to business. And then second to that is finding your focus and actually sticking to it. I think a lot of people tend to do a lot more than they should be. And when your focus is that widespread, it takes away from what makes your company as great as it is, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what would you say are some of the biggest takeaways or lessons you learned in the past decade or so running up to Taylor Stitch?
I mean, I think, the two things I mentioned before were continue to make a great product and provide great service are, the two things that I learned very early. The next thing, and those are like two of the most important things to focus on. The next important thing to focus on is people. As we started to grow and we started to hire people, San Francisco is a very challenging place to hire people because it's very expensive. It's hard to, as a small business, it's hard to pay what, you're never going to compete with what Google can pay or any of those big tech companies. So you really need to find people that are like in it because they love what you're doing and they love the mission and want to be a part of that mission, as well as then investing in them and letting them do, really have the reins to run. And I think that's the other thing that we've really learned. And it, to be honest, has been the biggest challenge. Hiring people is the biggest difficulty that I've ever hired and managing people. Because there's just, everybody has a different personality. Everybody has like different needs. And you need to, be able to manage those while managing the business, and making sure that the business is going forward and motivating people to do their best work it's just naturally a challenge. And it's something that, I'd never claimed to be the best person at that. And, whenever we interview somebody, one of the first things we say is this is a highly entrepreneurial environment. I will say that I hate managing people and I want to hire really smart people that I think are incredibly capable and let them run. And we are here to be a sounding board and have a conversation and, help guide. But, we want people that are hyper motivated to do their job. And doing that, I think, has been the other biggest lesson to try and learn and execute, which is hard because when you're hiring people, you might spend a few hours with them at most. And then you're like, hey, you're going to come in here every day and join our team. You don't really get to date that much.
I think it was the founder of Home Depot that kind of put the emphasis on this, but he always talked about how his employees were his greatest asset and were the customers to the company, because without productive employees, your business isn't going to succeed or go anywhere. So I think that's important to kind of put the emphasis on ensuring that you hire the right people and that you take care of your employees of your business.
Yeah, I mean, couldn't agree more. And it's a challenge, and like motivating, because that's high level of service that we expect comes from our team members, and the product also comes from our team members, and when everybody cares to make the best thing and provide the best service, then that's when magic happens.
One thing I haven't asked so far is about the name Taylor Stitch. Where did that come from?
So it's somewhat engineered. I mean, our first apartment was at the corner of Taylor and Clay in the 1200 Taylor building, kind of at the top of Nob Hill, when we had the 5 guys in 3 bedrooms. And it sounds very fancy on the top of like one of the nicest hills in San Francisco. I will say it was not overly fancy, although it looked more like a 1970s fancy apartment with like a lot of like dark stained wood and a marble fireplace. But it was by no means like overly nice. But we were sitting there, in our bedroom, which was also our office, which was also like everything that we had to do with our business, and we were just trying to come up with a name. The obvious play on the name Taylor is, like tailors are who make our garments. That's like how we always thought about it. We loved the name because it was unisex, and if we had made women's clothing, we could do that. And the stitch was the backbone of every garment. What held it together, and that we really wanted to kind of like create this name and assume this unknown identity that the customer could kind of take on their own, but also like nodded back to the clothing itself and how we cared about the way that things fit and the way that things were made. There was also this really cool photo of Steve McQueen, leaning up against the Taylor and Clay sign. His apartment in the movie Bullet was actually kitty cornered to our apartment. And it was that was also just like an easy, maybe we should have called it Taylor Clay or something like that. It would also be a pretty cool name, but the stitch always felt good to us.
And I like the name Taylor Stitch. It's very unique and it kind of stands out as an apparel company.
Yeah, and there's like a little bit of fun and cheekiness to it. There's like a little tongue in cheek, and I'll say one of my co-founder Barrett is has just an amazing way with the written word. He's always like very intelligent, like when it came to naming things and funny things like that. And so when he kind of pushed this one out, it was like, oh, that's good. There's something good there. Way better than a lot of our other ideas.
Yeah. Small tangent here in terms of that question. One of the things I found while researching your company was the mention of there being 22 stitches per an inch for a shirt. Where did this derive from? And can you talk a bit more about your work with traditional shirt makers in relation to that?
Yeah, so when we first started, we worked with the second oldest shirt maker in the country to learn about, stitching. And fine tailored shirts, like a high stitch count, which is that stitches per inch, shows that like it's not shoddily made. And so what that, a lot of it we talk about like French seams and things like that, we still make products with that. A lot of, as our clothing has become more rugged, while also giving nods to that refinement, but we've like gone in a more casual path. Like we use a lot of like double felled seams, triple needles, things of that like are more like workwear driven, in like kind of more casual tailored settings that make the product look and feel more casual. But we always kind of harken back to that idea of, depending on the use of this thing, we want to like more stitches per inch. Like even our double needle stitches have like very high stitch counts, because it still means that like there's a tighter stitch to that.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, we have sometimes had to pull our stitch count back because we've used sometimes we use looser weave fabrics, and if we use a looser weave fabric and we put too many stitches per inch, it will actually sometimes puncture too many holes in the fabric and make it less strong. It actually it will give the fabric some ability to break down. And so sometimes we've actually like done too many. We've had to like pull that back. So just a little bit about, again, as the information changes, sometimes we change, or as the product changes, sometimes we need to change to make it better.
How do you see retailing changing, whether it be brick and mortar or e-commerce?
Yeah, I think the buzzwords that everybody talks around right now is the idea of omnichannel. A mix of wholesale, brick and mortar, and e-com.
Right.
We will always build predominantly brick and mortar business. E-com business, but we will mix the other ones in. And, we see a lot of these big retailers going into bankruptcy right now who have, too many stores. And we think that stores are an amazing thing. I personally love physical experiences. We have 2 of them here in San Francisco. We'll contemplate doing more, but we are at our core a direct online business. But I do see retailing. I mean, listen, it's another place for consumers to explore your brand, understand your product, experience everything. No matter how great of a service we can offer online, you can evoke all 5 senses in a store. Like we use really amazing fabrics, and it is really hard to show our fabrics, and the true complexity of them online.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to have a store that somebody can walk into and feel them is cool. Or we'll do like we've been doing a lot more pop-up markets this fall. We've been to Austin, we've been to Boston. We'll be in Brooklyn in December. It's really cool to go out there and just have people, touch and feel our product and kind of say like, wow, this is really amazing. These fabrics are really cool. And show them that.
Right. I noticed another company that does something similar, except that they do it with showrooms.
Mm-hmm.
Bonobos, the manufacturer of those fit chinos, they offer their pants in a variety of stores, but I've noticed that they've begun using showrooms more so as opposed to selling in brick and mortar stores. So people would go into them, they would get fitted, they would try on the clothes, but then they would have people purchase them online to be delivered directly to their house. Mm-hmm. So I find that like a unique way of going about reaching out to the consumer to allow them to try on the clothing, but kind of limit the amount of presence or footprint you have in specific areas.
Yeah, I mean, it not only limits the amount of presence and footprint, but it limits the amount of inventory. Like you keep all of that inventory at one centralized warehouse versus, 200 stores. I love the showroom model. It's definitely something that we've played with and talked about from our business, especially with like more of our like limited, like we'll call it like more short run items. It's like being able to go in and like try on a cool plaid shirt, in a Dobby pattern that, we might not make tons of, but they could have a size one at that store. So you could get it, test it, and then buy it. And then we could just ship it to you directly.
Between customer service experience, try before you buy it, and subscription services, amongst others, The online retailing landscape is evolving to provide on customer service experience. Taylor Stitch has already taken steps in this direction with their easy-to-use product exchange feature, the restitch feature, as well as the workshop. What are some other ways you see not only Taylor Stitch moving forward with this, but other companies as well?
Oh man, what are some cool things I've seen online? I think the utilization of SMS and proactive outreach. I still kind of like always go back to what we're trying to do around reaching out to our customers in a meaningful way and just being there to help them. The things that Zappos and Backcountry have done on that side, I think are amazing. I think that's going to truly be the differentiator over the next, I don't know, call it 12 to 48 months in e-commerce. It's like, how do you just continue to provide a better experience for your customer that's more seamless, more interactive, and gets them to be a part of your journey more than just like a window, like something like looking through the window.
Apple actually has been turning towards that direction as well. So as opposed to selling very expensive high-end models of phones, they're turning their direction towards building that ecosystem and providing the best user experience for customers to be engaged with other users as well. So it's fascinating to see that's not only being done in apparel, but also in the technological industry as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So the last question I have for you today is, what advice would you give to people out there looking to start a company, or even if it's general advice as well?
I think it's kind of, there's a few parts here. The first is, don't be afraid to take a risk. I think if you are somebody that's, willing to go take a risk and get try starting a company, you're always going to be able to go back and get another job. So like jumping out of that safe space to go try something, it's almost like, think about it as going to get your MBA, but not paying $250,000 to do so. I think that's always like a safe thing, and listen, I get that everybody that does this is at different times in their lives. It's a lot harder to do that when you have a mortgage and a kid. Because you have a little bit more fiscal responsibility there that you need to take care of. But my biggest advice is like, don't be afraid to, jump off the cliff and kind of dive in. And second is like, take calculated risks and persevere. Continue to give, like, make sure you've given it the reasonable effort, to see if it works or not.
All very valuable pieces of advice and ways to kind of perceive action for anybody that's kind of trying to start their own business or pursue their own thing. It's really been fascinating, taking the time to listen to your thoughts on everything here, Michael. I really appreciate you kind of talking about Taylor Stitch as a brand, as well as the apparel market as a whole. So thanks again, and I really look forward to seeing how Taylor Stitch continues to evolve as a company.
Of course. Tesha, thanks so much for having me, man. It's been a blast. The questions were awesome, and let me know if I can ever be helpful with anything else.
Great. Thank you again.
Cool. Have a good one.
You too. Bye. Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of the All Things Interesting podcast. I hope you all enjoyed the episode as much as I did. I really enjoyed sitting down with Maher from Taylor Stitch just to learn a bit more about the challenges that a lot of these startup companies go through, and even just really understanding the passions behind the work they do, how they operate, and what makes them unique. So I really hope everyone who listens to this episode found it helpful, whether it be if you're looking to start your own business or you're looking to grow your current business. Whatever the case, I hope this information is very helpful to you, and I look forward to sharing more conversations and interviews with unique individuals from a variety of businesses in the near future. That said, if you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe to the All Things Interesting podcast on your favorite platform and follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Tesher Cohen. Thanks again for listening, and stay tuned for new episodes in the